We go, recording in progress. Well, welcome to everyone, and thank you so much for taking time out of a very busy schedule to be part of our second think tank with 806 Technologies. The topic for today is debunking the myths surrounding emergent bilinguals. And it's funny because when I came to 806 Technologies, Brittany and a lot of the documents that we had here was referring to what I knew as English learners as emergent bilinguals. And Brittany Ryan, our director of marketing, who's here with us as well, is the one who educated me on the change actually in the law. So in Texas, the term is emergent bilinguals. And so I know that's not true across the nation yet, but there's some reason behind that. I'm sure we'll speak to that a little bit as well. And you all probably already know that, so we'd be preaching to the choir. But let me move forward and just give you a little look at our agenda for today. If my thing will advance, then we'll go up. Let's go back. So I'm Kevin Doherty. My role here is Chief Strategy Officer for 806 Technologies. Means I am a jack of all trades, master of none. So I get to do a little bit of everything, but I so love the mission of this company, which at the end of the day is to create a world of innovative schools. Today, I am so pleased and proud to welcome a very special guest and friend, Hortensia Pina. Hortensia and I have known each other for nearly 25 years. So that's about half our lives, Hortensia, roughly?
I'd say about 1/3 of our lives.
Oh, get up. All right. So Hortensia and I have known each other for a long time, and she truly is one of the most gifted educators I have ever had the good fortune to meet. And I always welcome the opportunity to introduce her to other people so that you all can claim the same by knowing Hortensia and getting the opportunity to work with her. I met Hortensia when she was a specialist at Alicia Chacon International School. She was a teacher, but she was also a reading recovery, descubriendo la lectura teacher. So a reading specialist, and she oversaw the Japanese community because the students at Alicia Chacon would be followed a dual language approach with Spanish, English, and then took a third language. And both of her daughters took Russian throughout their time at Alicia Chacon, and she oversaw the Japanese group. So she has an amazing history and expertise. And then in addition to that, she went on to the district level as a dual language coordinator and helped to build the dual language program in Isleta ISD, which became one of the premier dual language programs, not only in Texas, but throughout the world. I've talked to people from throughout the nation and the world. Everyone knew at the time about Isleta and the work that Hortensia and her colleagues were doing. She then was named the interim director of bilingual ESL. And before they could name her the full-time official director of bilingual ESL, I helped my company at the time, Thinking Maps, steal her away to come work for Thinking Maps, where she became a national consultant and is now one of the most sought after consultants in the field of emergent bilinguals, English learners, dual language, bilingual ed, you name it. Hortensia knows it and is an expert in it. So that's my story when it comes to Hortensia. She has an amazing family, a husband who is a nurse, a daughter's a nurse, and a daughter who's a scientist, researcher, has her doctorate. She's a brilliant young woman as well. She's just got an amazing family. And so we're just thrilled to have her here today. So Hortensia, please fill in what I've left out.
There's not much more to fill in. But he always sets the bar so high. I'm like, oh God, I have to do all of that and be able to do all of that. I'm like, okay, Kevin. Yeah, I don't think there's so much more to fill in other than the fact that my passion is working with English learners, being the fact that I am an English learner. and I still consider myself, I guess, an emergent bilingual, because even though, you know, you're fluent at that level and you're reading and writing at very high levels, language is always changing, you know, and you're always having to come back and learn and learn language. And so I still consider myself an emergent bilingual because I still make mistakes. I still fear writing. So some of those things never go away. And so, yeah, I think, you know, that is still where I'm at. I am very proud that to say that my girls were in the dual language program. And I think the biggest gift that we gave them was the fact that they can and are fluent in their heritage language in Spanish. They're the only grandkids that can actually have a conversation with my parents in Spanish. And so being able to continue that, and hopefully they will continue that with their students, with their children, is my hope. You know, when I first saw emergent bilinguals, you know, that we're no longer using ELs, and my thing was, okay, so hopefully that is true, you know, because it cannot just be a name, emergent bilingual. It has to be the goal, you know, that they are truly, that our students truly become bilingual, biliterate. You know, I'm, you know, hoping that that is, you know, that is the end, that they are truly bilingual, biliterate. So, yeah, I'm already getting off track. So, yeah, but I think he's already mentioned a lot of the things that I have done, and to lead me where I'm at right now. So,
Well, thank you, Hortensia. That was perfect, and I appreciate you for rounding that out. And speaking of rounding it out, I'd like to round things out with the others that are on the call introducing themselves. I'd like to start with Brittany. If you could just tell us who you are, what you do, and why you're here.
Sure. I'm Brittany Ryan. I'm the Director of Marketing at 806 Technologies, and I help Kevin and the rest of the team communicate and market our portfolio of products and services.
And she's amazing, folks. Y'all can't have her. She is so good at what she does, and we've only been working together 3 months, but feels like we've been working together for years. So it's awesome, and I mean that in all the greatest of ways. So thank you, Brittany. Appreciate your support. And right beneath you on my little screen here is Seth. So Seth, would you say hello? And you can do that in English or Spanish. Seth is bilingual as well. So Seth.
Hola, ¿cómo están ustedes, los parlantes de español? No, I'm happy to be here. Once again, I'm sitting again in front of the school. My son is a 4th grader here, and I'm on pickup duty again this week. And so I want to say hello to everyone. I mentioned earlier that I am a UH alum, but I also have affiliations with, you know, other universities, and definitely want to send a shout out to Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio. But I've got my start as a bilingual teacher in education some years ago. Ended up working with students at all levels. I started in elementary and then middle school, and worked my way up to college, teaching college as well. So happy to be here, happy to learn from you all. I always get something new. I didn't know about the emergent bilingual status. That's awesome. So happy to hear more. Thanks.
Seth is also a published author. So last year he published a book for career and technical education that's being used across the nation. So what's the title of your book, Seth?
The title of the book is College and Career Success, 9th edition, and it's co-authored with Dr. Marcia Freilich out of San Diego, Cuyamaca Community College.
Awesome. Hortensia knows San Diego. She's been doing quite a bit of work with San Diego Unified School District.
yeah,
That is
She would love to meet you.
I'm there 2 weeks out of almost every month. So.
Oh, wow. If you want me to make introductions, I'll be happy to. Dr.
That would be
Freilich is
awesome.
Let me go to Kathleen now. Kathleen's right underneath you on my little Brady Bunch screen here. Kathleen?
I'm Kathleen Whitty, and I serve as the EL Support Director and Family and Community Engagement Director for Quinlan ISD.
Awesome. So, and Kathleen, you've been there for 10 years, you said, in this role?
That's correct.
Awesome. So we're going to be reaching out to you to get some pointers and advice, since you're a pretty veteran in this role. Maybe. I don't want to put you on the spot again.
Sure.
Sure. And Jadwiga?
So my name is Jadwiga Muse, and I started out in Tyler, my educational career in Tyler as a Spanish teacher for several years. And then I moved up as an administrator of a campus. And then I worked with a bilingual and ESL program as a facilitator. And I led a lot of the compliance and testing and TELP and, you know, the good stuff. And then finally, I came into this role with Chapel Hill as a director of the program and literacy and numeracy coordinator for the district. And TELP coordinator, because it makes sense.
Of course it does. Those are some tough dots to connect, but I guess you can connect them.
Yeah.
Well, that is awesome. Well, welcome to all of you, and thank you again for being part of this today. Well, so we have a common focus here, and I think that's why you chose to be a part of this call. And one of the things that we're going to focus on are the myths, and that was the title of the session, and hopefully in part what drew you to this think tank session. So I was struck by a recent article by NWEA that was entitled "Debunking the 5 Myths of Emergent Bilinguals." And so we looked at this, the 5 myths, and then we set about to debunk them. And we created some videos with another colleague of ours, Cindy and Hortensia, and working with Brittany and a videographer, we put together some really wonderful video clips responding to those 5 myths. Today, for the sake of time, we're just going to focus on 2. So I worked with Hortensia to identify the 2 most critical myths. And but in addition to that, we're providing you with an activity that there'll be a QR code for. So if you've got your phone, your iPhone or Android ready, and you can just take a little snapshot of this QR code that will come up after we address the 2 myths, you'll have an activity that you can recreate in your district, in your schools, that will follow the same pattern that we're following today, only it will be for all 5 of the myths, not just the 2 that we're addressing today. So after we do that, we're going to take some time with Hortensia to debunk the myths, and then just visit with Hortensia in general, as well as everybody on this call, as we discuss best practices for serving emergent bilinguals. We'll have some time to discuss that together. And we're going to introduce to you a solution that 806 Technologies has to streamline the LPAC process. It's called TELP, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. Share some more about what we can do to support your leadership teams in your districts, and then we'll close out. Are there any questions before we dive into these myths surrounding emergent bilinguals? Ready to go? All right, so let's hit it. Let's move forward. My clicker will go. So we've shared about Hortensia, and here is the first myth. So I'll give you just a moment to read this first myth. Is that resonating with you all at all, this first myth? Let's take a look at the video. So this is one of our 5 videos. Again, you'll get copies of all of the videos.
I think one of the greatest barriers in education is low expectations.
At times, we equate language proficiency with intelligence. And because a student is not proficient in the language of instruction, does not mean he cannot access that content.
The judgments or the expectations that administrators, teachers, support staff, parents, peers, those expectations that we set for those students has a huge impact on their access to the content in the curriculum.
As teachers, we have to help them just layer on the language, because we don't have to reteach that content, but we just have to show them the language that goes along with that content.
John Hattie's Visible Learning documented a 25-year longitudinal study over 190 different variables that impact student learning, and teacher expectation for student achievement is top 3. So what that says is what that teacher thinks about that student or what that administrator thinks about that student is setting a bar and considerably contributes to that student's ability to grow and access the curriculum.
So Hortensia, I'm going to pitch it to you now to speak about debunking this myth, but open it up to the group as well. I noticed Jadwiga's head nodding as she was listening and watching that video. So I imagine she'll have some to weigh in on this as well. So if you could start us off, Hortensia.
No, absolutely. I mean, this definitely can, has to be a conversation. I would rather have a conversation than just me talking. But when you take a look at, when you're talking about this myth and, again, like as I mentioned before, a lot of teachers and administrators, well, and first of all, about myths, you would think that, these myths have been around for years and years and years, and you would think that by now things had gotten cleared up, but it's not. It's something that we have to continuously come back and revisit and talk about and have those conversations. And even though we say, oh yeah, we did that 5 years ago. No, but now you've got new staff, you've got new teachers, you have new administrators that you constantly have to come back and revisit and talk about them. Right now, as I am working in San Diego, I'm working and doing literacy and training for kinder first and second. I'm hearing teachers repeat some of these myths, and I'm going like, I thought those were gone. I thought we had already addressed those. Come on. And no, it's a conversation that needs to be had over and over again. And so when you think about this one that, oh, here's a new student coming in, and yeah, he doesn't know any English. So, he's not going to be on grade level in content and things like that. They right away equate the fact that he doesn't know the language with the fact that he doesn't have the content. This child is not coming in as a clean slate. This child is bringing with them a lot of knowledge and information and content. So when you think about students starting the school year at the early grades, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, that's a level playing field because they're all having to learn that content, that information, whether they're coming in as English dominant, Spanish dominant students, they're all having to learn that and be able to access that. And the beauty, especially in Texas, is that we can teach in their L1, especially if they have the Spanish. So we have that, the ability to do that. When they're coming in the upper grades, then we have to find out, what are they bringing to the table? What are they bringing to the table? So making sure that, sometimes as, the first thing we as teachers notice are the gaps. Oh, they don't know this, they don't know that, they don't know this, and we start noticing the gaps. And this so reminds me of a time with one of my daughters that the teacher had her call me and tell me she failed a reading test. And I said, okay, I said, so let's have a conversation about this. And so when we met with the principal, she was like, okay, she can't do this, she can't do this, she can't do this, she can't do this. And as a parent, you right away start going like, okay, your chest starts coming out and your feathers start like reading. I'm like, okay, take a deep breath, take a deep breath. And my next question to her was, what can she do? Okay, tell me what can she do? Because until we know what she can do, then we can plan where to go. And I think a lot of times we focus on what they can't do and try to fill in holes, not knowing where are they and where do we move from there. And I think if we took the time and really focused on, okay, let's start this lesson off with, let's revisit, what do you know about this? First of all, that validates what the child is bringing to the table in whatever language that they understand it in. But it tells that child, you know stuff, okay? And you already have something to build on. Second of all, we don't have to reteach. That saves us time and that helps us keep moving forward, you know? And so, and then third, it just really then focuses your lesson on what is needed and you're not wasting time on gaps. Okay, and really have a clear vision of where that lesson needs to go. One thing I have always wondered is, you know, we at times pull, especially high school students, middle school students, pull them out for ESL, and they have an ESL program. And my thinking was always, why do we have an ESL program? Why are we not doing science and use the science textbook during ESL or the history textbook during ESL and give them that support? So when they do go to those science classes and those math classes and those history classes, they've already have gotten some of that support that they needed, versus trying to do something completely different. So making sure that we can see what they are bringing to the table is important. And looking at that versus saying, they don't know English, so how am I going to teach cell biology? Well, they might have already had cell biology, okay? So let's see, what do they know about cell biology? Give them that language for what they already know and then keep moving forward on that. Okay, so Joita, I kept seeing you move, shake your head. What do you want to add to this?
Yes, I mean, it's such a great conversation. You know, one of the things that everyone wonders is what happens with the LTELs, with the long-term ELs.
Oh gosh, yes.
And, you know, for me, one of having been in both sides and bilingual in elementary and then seeing secondary, since I taught, my background teaching is secondary, but I did, because being with the bilingual and ESL department, I did extensive, you know, walkthroughs with the bilingual and elementary classrooms. And there's a huge difference night and day. And one of the things that we've always talked about was first, the expectation. We always saw that the expectation in those bilingual classrooms is super high. Also, the environment, the classroom environment is just so rich in language. And, you know, you have those anchor charts everywhere. You have generated alphabets. You have, you know, specific types of word walls for our students. And so there is just so much rich linguistic support around the classrooms. But do we have the same in secondary? And the answer is no, we don't. So all of a sudden you have those group of students who have been, I guess I can say, catered to their linguistic needs, pre-K through 5 or pre-K through 6. And then all of a sudden we just let go of all those supports, and it's like sink or swim type thing.
Right.
And then, you know, we have our recent immigrants, and, you know, they're okay in elementary because we still have those supports. But when they get to secondary and our classrooms don't have those visuals, those anchor charts, those, you know, writing prompts, sentence stems, you know, all of those sort of things, you know, that's where we struggle. And our long-term and our ELs, you know, that's when they become our long terms.
Right. And you're right. I think you also think about teachers at that middle school and secondary level. Their thinking is, I teach science.
Yes.
Okay. I don't
Yes.
teach language, I teach science, I teach math, because we get that type of language also when we talk about the fact that students should be writing across the curriculum and that they should be writing in science and math. And what do you hear? I teach math, not writing. I don't know how to teach
Right.
math. You know, and you're right, you know, it's those language supports that need to be throughout, because language is not just taught during ESL.
No.
Language is taught from the moment they set foot into that school. That should be the focus, you know. And how do we get teachers to understand that no, it's not cheating if you offer them a word wall. It's not cheating if you show them how to use a bilingual dictionary. You know, it is about creating an independent child, giving them those supports that they can access on their own. It's about creating independent learners and allowing students to have that agency to say, I need help with this. Can you give me this?
Yeah.
It's about developing independency and agency for those students at the, especially at those levels.
Right. And so one of the things that I do at the beginning of the year with brand new teachers to kind of give them that sort of example of what teaching their content, you're teaching the language of your content. I start to ramble about LPAC and I start to say EBs without telling them what the definition of an EB is, and newcomers and, you know, and everything else. And your PLDs and your ELPs and TELPs and, you know, the different domains. And of course they're looking at me and I tell them, you know, the 4th week deadline, federal deadline. And they're just looking at me like, you know, and I talk to them about the monitored students, you know, the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, the 5s and PDs. And they're looking at me and I'm like, okay. So it's like, I see a whole lot of, you know, confusion and everything. And it's like, I am teaching you the language of LPAC. And you're struggling because I have not given you visuals. I have not given you a flow chart. I have not given you, I didn't front load any sort of information for you to grasp that when I talk about a PD, I'm talking about a parent denial.
Not professional development?
Yeah, not professional. So I tell them, you know, so that's my point to you. So if I'm going to teach you about LPAC, there's a couple of different things that I need to do to help you understand what that process and what that identification process is like, what the reclassification criteria is and everything else, so that they have a better understanding. And it's like, so when I teach LPAC, they at the end of the, you know, session with me, now they understand the whole identification reclassification process, which for us in Texas, that's the, you know, the exiting out of the EB status or reclassification into the English proficient status. And so it makes a little bit more sense of what that point is. So that, you know, biology teachers, it's like, go talk to algebra teachers about biology, and they're going to look at you the same way you looked at me. So it's like, so how would you help them understand, you know, your world?
Right. Yeah. One thing that I also kind of tell them is I say, well, okay, oh, you want to go to France? You can't access France until you know French. What if that was the case? That you cannot go and experience France because you don't know French. You know, that's the same thing you're doing, you know, that the same mentality with the students. You can't access science because you don't know the language.
Right.
So,
Well, let's Hortensia, this is an incredibly rich conversation, and I hate to be the one moving it forward, but I do want to get to the next myth, and I hope that it prompts the same level of conversation. And Jadwiga, what I feel like also is this is just the beginning of the conversation. And part of this is, you know, I already want to sit down with you and just have a 2-3 hour conversation. So this is the appetizer for the big buffet we're going to enjoy together after this think tank. So let me move us along unless there's strong opposition otherwise to the next myth, and then we can see what type of conversation that also caused. Let's go on. What about this one? You'd agree with that, wouldn't you, Jadwiga, Seth, Kathleen? Absolutely, right? Well, let's see what the experts have to say, which is everybody here.
Yeah.
When working with students, we work with diverse students. So identifying or creating a blanket accommodation does not work for all students. We have to look and see what are their individual needs.
So just thinking about this in my own experience and what I need as a learner, because we're lifelong learners, what I need might be different than what you need.
Because even if we know that that child is at the beginning level, and let's say we have 4 children who are at the beginning level, we can't say, here's the accommodation for these 4 children who are at a beginning level. Because even with within those 4 children, there are going to be different needs. So even if a child is at the beginning level, he or she might be higher in reading, but lower in writing. Your second student might be higher in writing and lower in reading.
If I'm a visual learner, I might need to see graphs, charts, videos. If I'm an auditory learner, I might need to talk through it or hear somebody talking through it. So even just that being said, a blanket accommodation is not going to reach every student where they are. Hence, it's a myth that blanket accommodations would work.
So one thing that I often hear is, oh, a good strategy is a good strategy. And if it's good, if you're going to use it with English learners, it's probably something that you could also use with special ed students and vice versa. Oh, that's a good strategy that we use in special ed. You can use it with English learners. So I always stop and say, what message is that giving when you say special ed strategy or accommodation is also good for a second language learner? You know, is that true? You know, you always think, oh, so then an English learner is also a special ed student, and a special ed student is also an English learner. You know, that, you know, I think it creates the wrong, it sends the wrong message, first of all. But then and again, there are certain things that students could use, but I think in both the videos, it explains very, very nicely the fact that you have to know the child. You have to know your students. And one thing that I remember so clearly from a training that I had the opportunity to attend was a high school teacher who took over a failing high school. And he said the only thing he did was that he did not allow teachers to teach the first week of school. The first week of school was about building relationships and getting to know where the students were at. Because if you knew where the students were at and what their needs were, then you knew how to be able to help that child, help them move forward. And I think this about this thing about blanket anything is something that really does need to be discussed, because I always worried when, as a director, when they said, oh, this is going to help all your kids. It's like, I don't know. There's not a silver bullet out there. There isn't a silver bullet out there that's going to help all our students. You know, so going back to just, you have to know the kids. Okay. Seth, you had unmuted earlier. Did you want to respond to that myth?
No, one of the things is both my boys and are special education. However, gifted and talented special education. So I wasn't, when I heard special education, I wonder sometimes if we use these terms interchangeably, loosely, whatever, and they have varying meaning. When I was a school teacher, special education, it didn't include gifted and talented instruction. But the GT plan for Texas for special education is geared and specific to gifted and talented students. However, one of the things I noticed when I read the plan was that it's individualized instruction. They promote critical thinking. It's wonderful when you read this GT plan. I would recommend we do that for all students. I mean, that because we're only doing it for a certain population to get them to a certain level, to get them much further than I won't say the rest, but I see the type of instruction that promotes the critical learning, critical thinking, conversations. I just want to be, when we talk about special education, sometimes it's, it's a kind of a two-edged sword, and you're right, we don't want the message, and I agree with you, Hortensia, that we shouldn't skew it to where people think, oh, you're putting them into a group where because it's a large group that, with lots of labels, and we're big on labels. And so I just wanted to be sure when we talk about special education, that we're on the same playing, the same playing field. We're talking about the same type of individualized attention, but one might be, I don't know if there's what they do in a classroom for, I guess, learning disabilities. Although a learning disability, a student could be, twice exceptional, I think is the term, where you can have a learning disability and be gifted. So I think when people talk about the special education, I do agree with you that it can be lost. The meaning the intention could be lost in what they're trying to say. That's all.
A quick interjection there to what you've been sharing, and Hortensia. First of all, Hortensia, what I'm hearing is the dangers of a deficit mindset. That if we approach our learners with a deficit mindset, whether it's our emergent bilinguals or special ed and whatever that means for the student, that labels are things with which we need to be very careful. Our mindset is something with which we need to be very mindful. And Seth, I think this idea of labels is critically important. As Hortensia mentioned, as we shift from English learner to emergent bilingual, that's a very intentional shift in the label itself. But labels, even the best of labels, have their pitfalls if we're not very careful. And in terms of the impact that can have on the learners that we serve. So I actually like to address labels at some point over the course of this school year as one of our think tank topics, both the pluses and minuses that labels represent in our schools. So I appreciate you for bringing that up. And Hortensia, I love your focus on a shift away from a deficit mindset. Jadwiga, you're nodding your head again, so I know you have more to weigh in on this.
Yes, I think one of the things that our teachers struggle with is sometimes they just need more education to understand what are instructional accommodations, when can you use them, what are some sort of ways of identifying a student that might need a graphic organizer versus some sentence stems or, whatever that might be. And then what do those instructional accommodations look like when you are recommending accommodations for the STAR? And so one of the things that I train my administrators on when it comes to that point is when they teach their teachers, one of the things that I let them know is that, we don't do grade level recommendations. So my whole entire third grade class is going to get extra time. We specify that it's all completely individualized, even for the content, because a student might be ready to take the reading STAR in English, but they might need to take the STAR in math and Spanish. And so you have to have that sort of evidence. And I show them and I teach them that, when you look at those unit assessments, you know, if we're testing them in both languages, there should be a huge disparity, not by 2 points, not by 5 points, but there should be a very distinguishable disparity between both languages where you can say confidently, no, the student is ready for it in English, or the student is ready for it in Spanish, whatever that might be. And so, and at the same time, it's also, as a district, it's having that structurized system of what your documentation expectations of your teachers is going to look like. So in my former district, what we had was that when a teacher is going to recommend an accommodation, they needed to document like their evidence. When did they use that accommodation? Was it on a quiz? Was it up for homework? Was it for an assignment? And what was the result of giving that student that accommodation? So that way you actually had specific evidence that the accommodation was appropriate for that student, for that content, and it was being done, utilized in a routine fashion. It was individualized, and it showed that the student needed it. Because one of the examples that I tell them is that when it comes to a bilingual dictionary, that recommending an accommodation, you can hinder the student versus actually supporting them. So if that student has never touched a bilingual dictionary and you put that in front of their face and, you know, for the STAR test, they're going to end up wasting time trying to figure it out because they've never utilized it. And it might end up actually having them be score lower than actually scoring higher. So those are the several things that I stress on when it comes to those accommodations. But I know with even in our district, something that we're doing when we come back from winter break is we're doing a PD session for teachers on what instructional accommodations look like for EBs, for RTI, for special ed.
Awesome. That is
And kind of hitting the why you
Mhm.
use an accommodation. Because a lot of times, you know, when you look at the TELPs and when you're looking at students and saying, okay, what accommodations, you have a list of all these accommodations and they go like, check, 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 check,
Yes.
to do this. But they have no clue as to why do I need to use a
Right.
bilingual dictionary? When do I use a bilingual dictionary? And what's the evidence that lets me know that's the best accommodation for them to do? Because there's just so many of them, but they don't know the why or the when or what lets me know that that's the best one. And you're exactly right. A lot of times teachers that once it comes to STAR, it's like, well, I'm going to give them this and I'm going to give them that. And, you know, thinking that the more is better.
Yes.
And yeah, sometimes they've never even seen it. They're going like, okay, she put it in front of me. I guess I might as well try to figure out how to use this now.
Yes.
They do it a week before and thinking like, yeah. So the child automatically thinks, I've got to start using it somehow.
Right. And I know like for us at one point when extra time kept a student from being reclassified, back in the day, if the LPAC recommended extra time for an EB on STAR reading or writing, at the end of the year, even if the student met all of TA's exit criteria, at that time it was called exiting criteria, then the student wasn't able to exit. And so that was something else that we stressed on, was that, you know, from my experience and from even like the previous year's administration, 9 times out of 10, those students that got extra time, they never utilized it ever. Now things have changed and there isn't that time constraint. So extra time no longer is an accommodation. But back in the day, yeah, we had to kind of like teach teachers to be strategic and to really educate them, because even our bilingual teachers, they were so protective. Oh, but they need it, they might need it. And it's like, it's individualized. You can't give your whole entire third grade extra time. You just can't.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, it's kind of one of those things like, well, if I can get it, I'm going to get it.
Yes.
You know, it's there. So I'm going to go ahead and take it.
So let me move us to the last little piece of this. And clearly this is a conversation. Again, it just more evidenced each topic that we raised that this is a conversation we need to have more of. And I want to thank, before we even close, Jadwiga, Seth, and Kathleen again for taking the time to be here, but more importantly, for your contributions, for your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions, the mistakes that that you may have learned from. So thank you for being such a rich part of the conversation. As we go forward here, as I mentioned, the activity's right here. So the activity that we just engaged in, I wrote up as an activity plan, and you can simply take a picture of the QR code here, but we can also provide this deck for you. So I'll work with Brittany on providing you the recording as well as the deck so that you have it for your own uses. But if you want to grab this here, also you can see that the article that I mentioned earlier that I referenced is also, the link is here as well. So look, Jadwiga, I'm so glad that you mentioned LPAC and the way in which you build the vocabulary around LPAC to sort of pave the way for the educators that are going to be part of LPAC, that these are terms, these are acronyms that we use during the LPAC process. And so here at 806 Technologies, we have designed a software called TELP that is designed to streamline the LPAC process. So we don't have a lot of time to discuss it or go into it very deeply, but Hortensia spent some time here with the folks at 806 Technologies, and I'd love for her just at a very high level to share your thoughts around TELP, and then I want to close it out with an event that we have coming up this summer. So Hortensia, if you would just share your thoughts briefly on the topic of TELP.
One of the big things that I saw about TELP was that I remembered when we do LPAC that we spent so much time just filling out forms and getting the forms and signing the forms, and not enough time on the conversations that needed to be had about students, because it was like, let's get through all these forms and sign them. And so this TELP streamlines all of that so well that it really does give you the time as you're working through each piece to be able to have and stop and have those conversations, like when you're looking at those accommodations and things like that. It really does give you that time because everything is so streamlined. And I'm like, God, I remember having to carry all these folders and you're going and you're spending so much time just on that, and not what needs to be happening, which was the conversations. Those are the important pieces of it. And that's one thing that I'm like, God, I wish I had that, because it would have been, and you all have probably been around where it was just like, just pass it around and sign it. Okay, here's the next one, pass it around and sign it. And there were no conversations.
Right.
Because it was just get through the paperwork. And that was the one thing that I'm like, oh my God, this would really gives us the time to truly, again, going back to our conversations, know the child and be able to make those decisions, those correct decisions for that child.
Thanks, Hortensia. And so we can provide a demo of this if it's something you want to look at more deeply, but you can reach out to any of us here and we're glad to provide that for you. When Brittany does the follow-up, you'll have all of our contact information so you can follow up with us to get a deeper dive into that. And I love coming to Houston. Seth lived there 8 years. That's where our kids were born. And Jadwiga, I love the Tyler area and Chapel Hill, and I need to see Mr. Lamondine and say hello and have a great lunch with him. So we definitely want to help and support that. And one of the ways that we're connecting the dots, literally and figuratively, is with our event that we're putting together, the National Learning Summit called Connecting the Dots. So Brittany, I sung her praises at the beginning, but she has worked with a team to put together this teaser, a 30-second teaser. So let's take a quick moment to look at the teaser for this event coming up in June here in Frisco. Oh, almost played it twice there. Please share with us on Twitter and tag us. We would love to hear what's going on. There's a lot that both of you have to share, and I'm sure Kathleen as well that had to drop off early, but we want to follow you. We want you to follow us. You know, Hortensia knows this, if anybody knows this. We become a friend with you once, we're a friend for life. So like us, hate us, we're your friend for life. And so we definitely want to continue this. This is just the start of a really rich, important conversation. Clearly, as Hortensia said, we've been talking this talk for a long time. I sat in at a state and federal programs conference in Louisiana in Baton Rouge a few weeks ago. And as I sat there in the audience and I listened to some of the challenges and concerns and the data that was shared, I was kind of shaking my head thinking, have we been having this conversation for this long? This is my 39th year in education. And I'm always hopeful, I'm always encouraged, but I thought, you know what, we need to shake things up. And that's one of the reasons Hamish Brewer is going to be our keynote speaker, because Hamish is outside the box thinker from New Zealand who has turned around schools in some challenging schools in Virginia. And so we want you to see him. Also, a good friend, speaking of not shaking people, Dr. Charles Dupree is been a friend for over 25 years, former superintendent of Fort Bend ISD, and he's going to be our closing keynote speaker and also doing a breakout session. So Jadwiga, you need to tell that to Mr. Dean, because Mr. Dean is a huge fan of Charles Dupree. And so I've actually been trying to connect the two of them for some time now. So you tell him a whole team needs to come, because if he brings 5 people to the summit, 1 person is free. So I want to see 5 people there, and tell Mr. Dean that Kevin said a team of 5 needs to come to the summit this summer. And Dr. Dupree is going to be the closing speaker, and I'll finally be able to connect Dr. Dupree with Lamondine.
Gotcha.
Got it? Okay. So this was an awesome conversation. Thank you all so much. I love that it was a small group, because there was a lot to share, and hopefully many people will get to watch this. And Jadwiga and Seth, you'll become more famous than you were before you joined this think tank. So
Seth, you were going to say something.
Oh, I wanted to see if I would love to have something I can share on my social media to help promote the June conference. So if this video or if y'all have something that you want the public to have, I can put it on my various social media sites. And
that's greatly appreciated, Seth, and I will be sure to contact you and give you all that information.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Seth. Always can count on you for that support, and I really appreciate it. Seth's a great connector. Speaking of connecting dots, Hortensia, we're going to give you the last word.
Well, thank you so much, Jadwiga, and I'm going to get that right, Jadwiga, and Seth, for sharing. And as you mentioned earlier, Seth, it's just learning, amongst ourselves. I think, it's never a one-way street. So thank you for what you all shared, and I look forward to more conversations. Seth, if you could send me the information. I'm in San Diego right after Thanksgiving for 2 weeks. So
okay.
Yeah, that would be, I would love to kind of say hi and meet them. And I love that Mexican restaurant there. I'm Mexican and I like that one. So that's like cool. So definitely need to come by and say hi to everyone there again.
Yes, absolutely. We look forward to
That's
seeing you
fun.
guys back.